I'm going to go ahead and call the Board of Adjustments and Appeals meeting to order. Ms. Warwick, could you please take roll?
Mr. Rieger?
Present.
Ms. Schmitz? Ms. Flynn?
Present.
Mr. Friesen?
Present.
Mr. Elstrom? Mr. Taylor?
Present.
Ms. Sheldorn?
Present.
Chair Finn?
Present. So currently there are 6 members present, so 5 affirmative votes will be needed to grant a variance request or appeal. The board is authorized to grant or deny variance by Part 3, Section 60 of the Englewood City Charter. Anyone aggrieved by a decision rendered by this board may appeal that decision to a court of record. However, such appeal must be made within 30 days of the board's decision. Any approved variance is effective at the end of the appeal period. Building permits for construction associated with an approved variance will not be issued until the appeal period is ended. Building permits must be obtained and construction begun within 180 days of the variance effective date. Procedure for the meeting is that the case will be introduced. An overview will be given by staff. Applicant will present their request and reasons the variance should be granted. Proponents will be given an opportunity to speak. Opponents will address the board if they're here. And then, if needed, staff will again address the board. The public hearing for case VAR2018-006, which is Brandis Meeks. The property is 3246 South Lincoln. They're requesting a variance to reduce the required ground floor commercial space to increase maximum front setback to build 2 attached homes. I have verification of publication and posting of the subject property. If staff could give us an overview.
I do. My name is Brooke Bell. I'm a senior planner with the Community Development Department. Good evening. As the chair mentioned, tonight is the public hearing for case VAR 2018-006 at 3246 South Lincoln Street. The applicant is requesting 2 variances. The first is to reduce the required ground floor commercial space from the required 50.1% to 0% to develop 2 attached townhomes. And the second variance is to increase the maximum front setback from 5 feet to 15 feet. So I'm going to just get us oriented here. This first map is a zoning map showing the location of the property. It's a little hard to read, but this is in your packets. So this would be Broadway, north and south. And this would be Floyd, east and west. The subject property is at 3246 South Lincoln, so this is Lincoln Street. In terms of zoning, the zoning for the subject property is MUB1, which is our mixed-use central business district zoning, and that is in the red. Just on the other side of Lincoln is MUB2, which is mixed-use general arterial business district. And then behind the subject property is the MUR3B, which is a mixed-use high-density residential zone, but it happens to have what's called a neighborhood preservation overlay over it, which limits development in here to multi-unit developments of 2 or under. So duplexes are allowed. Commercial is not allowed in this MUR3B. As I mentioned, in the MUB1, residential is allowed. However, you have to have 50% of the ground floor space be commercial. One thing that's kind of unique about this particular location is if you notice, in this particular area, the MUB2 widens out in this area, And also the MUB1, this block and this block are the only places that the MUB1 goes north of Floyd. So that's just a little bit on the zone districts that are in that area. This next slide is showing an aerial of the property. This is the subject property. This is Lincoln Street, Floyd to the south. And this shows the subject property as well as properties that provided neighbor notifications in blue. They're a little hard to read, but it's this property up here, and these neighbor notifications were all in favor of passage of the variance. So it's this property on the north side of the block, and then the two properties directly north of the subject property, and then the property behind it. This property to the south is a large parking lot. This is just an exhibit of an existing survey of the house that exists there. Here's a couple of photos of the house that currently exists on the property. It's currently boarded up. And then this is the site plan of what is proposed by the applicant. As you can see, it's a duplex, much like you would see in any of the R2B zone districts or MUR3B. So you would see that type of duplex in a zone district like this yellow area up here, this brown area, as well as this MUR3B. That's what the applicant is proposing. The second variance has to do with the front setback. And in the MUB1 and B2 zone districts, instead of having a minimum front setback like you would in most residential districts, it has a maximum front setback or a build-to line. So in fact, and it was intended for commercial districts like Broadway, where you're trying to bring the buildings to the street to kind of create this pedestrian experience for retail and that kind of thing, a much more urban experience. So that is required in the MUB B1 and B2. In this particular case, the applicant is requesting to not have to push the building up to the street, but rather to have a maximum front setback of 15 feet from the front property line. And he can talk a little bit about that, but in essence, it's to match the adjacent properties, residential properties, more closely. Because since these are much older homes, they are not pushed to the street. They have a greater setback than the 0 to 5 maximum that the B1 and B2 zone district require. So that is the site plan with the 2 units. It does meet all the other dimensional requirements other than that front setback of the MUB1 zone district in terms of lot coverage, landscape area, those types of things. Side setbacks, rear setbacks, parking, and then these are rear-loaded garages off the alley, which is typical in the neighborhood. This is just some photos of the proposed duplex that would go there. And then this is a aerial that the applicant provided showing the subject property, and then some other duplexes and a fourplex that are on that same block shown here. The rest of these properties are all single-family residences, as well as this and this. These 2 properties across the street are kind of a medical office type use. With that, some of the analysis of the criteria is in your staff reports, but I'd be happy to answer any questions on this at this time.
Does the board have any questions for staff at this point?
I do. So, Mr. Bell, I think I remember that council was supposed to be looking at some code changes to the zone district to address this issue.
Yes.
What happened with that?
So let me give you a little bit of background on that. Some time ago, because we've had several cases come to this board, some time ago we did take this issue of the commercial requirement in the B1 and B2 zone district. We brought an amendment forward to the zoning code, the Unified Development Code. And we brought it to our Planning and Zoning Commission. The amendment passed 7-1, and that amendment was to do away with that requirement to have the 50% commercial in the MU B1 and B2, except for the 33, 34, and 3500 blocks of South Broadway. So that passed 7-1. We were teeing it up to go to council, and some other priorities came forward. The largest of which was a large task, was passage of the comp plan, and that delayed it considerably. After the comp plan was finally passed by City Council, we had some staff changes, and some more time passed before we were able to go to City Council. So very shortly after our last, as you know, this case came before this board in March with a little bit different, two different variants. Well, one variance was the same. It was to remove the commercial requirement. The second variance was for a dimensional requirement on a driveway. But as you know, that proposal had 5 townhomes. And so that did not pass. Well, there were 4 votes in favor of passage and 2 against, which does not enough to grant the variance. So that did not pass. The applicant wanted to come back with another proposal. But in terms of the commercial requirement coming back to council, shortly after that last variance hearing, we did take it to council. And it was at a study session meeting, and council indicated that they felt that enough time had passed since the planning and zoning public hearing, and they wanted some additional information, and essentially directed staff to take it back to the Planning and Zoning Commission. The Planning and Zoning Commission knows it's going to come back. We're gathering other information and some different information to take to Planning and Zoning, and as of yet it hasn't gone back to them. I think the bottom line is we don't know what the time frame could be going through Planning and Zoning Commission again, as well as council. And so the applicant has brought this forward to try and do something with the site, which is obviously not in good condition.
Thank you. So your response raised another question for me. You said that this the exact request had been before us before, and it did not pass with a vote of 4-2.
Correct.
I guess I'm wondering how many bites at the apple does the applicant get? There's no, isn't his process an appeal as opposed to bringing back the exact same request, hoping he gets a different composition of the board to pass the variance?
It's a different project. What he's proposing, granted, he is asking to remove the commercial requirement, but the scale of the project's been reduced down from the 5-unit townhome to the 2. I'm not aware of any provision in the code that would limit somebody from coming back with a proposal like that.
Are there any other questions from the board or staff at this point? Thank you, Mr. Bell.
Thank you.
May the applicant please come forward to testify in the case. Please state your name and address to the secretary who will administer the oath.
You swear or affirm that in the qualities of perjury that you have proceeding
Yes, ma'am. Brandis Meeks, 4155 East Jewel Avenue. Oh, the Lincoln address? Oh, I'm sorry. 3246 South Lincoln Street, Englewood. Okay, so really, we've met before, and before our proposed plan was to build 5 townhomes, and that didn't go over very well, and we simply want to go ahead and get a project started and get it done and sold, And so we've dropped 5 down to simply a duplex. You've seen the duplex. If you look on the actual map, you'll see that there's already 3 residential duplexes as well as a 4-plex on the same block. We've talked to the neighbors. We actually did go to every home on the block, but most people weren't home. There was actually one person whose family member was part of council, and so they couldn't sign anything. But everybody we talked to is definitely in agreement that they'd love to see just simply a duplex right there versus what's there now, which is like a 70, 80-year-old boarded up shack. And so that's pretty much it. With the zoning, we're requesting that you give us an opportunity to build a duplex versus, having to build commercial. And I just don't think that if we're forced to build commercial, we're going to have to. We can't just continue to carry debt service on a property. So, but I just don't think that anybody on the block wants to see a commercial building there when we can easily just build a duplex. It'll be a beautiful duplex that falls in line with other duplexes that are being built throughout the city. One thing to consider is, if they do decide to go back and change the code later and we're still waiting, well, then we can build what people don't want us to build there. So I just think it's easier just to pass the duplex and we can just go ahead and get this thing built. So that's pretty much it.
Does the board have any questions for Mr. Meeks?
How important is the front setback part of it? I understand the commercial part of it. I guess setback-wise, there are obviously other design things you could do. You could just move the whole building forward if you wanted to, I suppose. So I'm just curious about what's driving that request.
So to me, it's not necessary for me personally. If we're that far up, then I can just build a bigger building, which is not a problem. However, I definitely feel like for the neighbors, it's a big deal because they want the street to be in alignment. So we want all the houses. It's as much as possible. Obviously there's a couple houses to the far north that are pushed back even further than everything else. But you just want to make sure that the street is in alignment, especially when driving down the street. You want all the properties in alignment as much as possible. And so I definitely feel like the reason I asked for it was specifically because once we were putting the site on the plans on the site, I said, well, wait a minute, we're actually really far ahead of the other properties, and so we need to push this thing back. And then I called, so we actually did push it back on the plans. We sent it in to Brooke, and Brooke said, oh, red flag, you can't because of the code. The code says you have to build within the first 5 feet, and which is great for commercial, but for a residential duplex, it's better for me because it has a bigger backyard, but it's not better for the neighbors. And I think that's what we're trying to create as a win-win for everybody.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the board for Mr. Meeks? I just have a comment, and that I appreciate what you've done because you didn't necessarily have to come back, much less come back with something that fit into the neighborhood a little better. But I do appreciate you. I think you took some of the comments from the neighbors last time a little bit to heart, and I appreciate that. That's it, I think, for you right now, Mr. Meeks. Thank you. Are there any persons present? Oh, I think we're done with you. Who wish to speak in favor of this request? In favor? Please come forward. And if you could state your name and address, and the secretary will administer the oath.
Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that you will tell the truth in this proceeding before the Board of Adjustment?
Yes, I do.
State your name again.
Cynthia Searfoss, 3297 South Downing. I'm one of the people that came and was vehemently opposed to the last project proposed by Mr. Meeks. Vehemently opposed. And I've been vehemently opposed to a lot of the things that have been put up in Englewood lately. But I want to say that I really do support Mr. Meeks' efforts to continue the residential nature of the east side of South Lincoln. I think it's actually I consider it wonderful that a builder whose concern usually is profit per square foot actually paid attention what the people of Englewood came and said on that day, and that he wants to make it look more in line with the residential nature of that neighborhood. I'm thrilled. I'm absolutely thrilled that he's doing this, and that's the only reason I'm here, is to support him and say thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Perfect. Does the board have any questions for Mrs. Searfost? Thank you, ma'am. I appreciate it. Oh, please. Perfect. Thank you, ma'am. Are there any other people who wish to speak in favor of the request? Please come forward, and if you could state your name and address to the secretary, who shall administer the oath.
Do you swear or affirm as a defendant that
I do.
state your name?
Scott Reynolds, 3244 South Lincoln. Wanted to commend, of course, the planners and the board for your attention to getting the zoning back to a little common sense. There's a lot of work still needs to be done, but it looks like you're doing the right things, and we as citizens appreciate it. Also, that it's the only two-story, of course, property that will be on the log, but can't really stand in the way of that, because it is all over the city, as Mr. Meeks mentioned. At 67, I would have had to move at a 3-story, 5-slot home. Too much of a cave and a difference in the sunshine that we've enjoyed for 30 years, but I can handle what's being planned. No, that's what I was originally told it was going to be, was a duplex. So the slot home was a bit of a surprise, and I'm glad that that's off the table. And thank you all for your attention and your time.
And real quickly, sir, if I remember correctly, you live right next door? Mm-hmm. Okay, perfect. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, the setback's a good idea, too.
Perfect.
That's a no-brainer.
Hold on, sir. Does the board have any other questions?
Thank you, State.
That was going to be my question, your
Oh.
opinion on
Yeah,
the setback.
I mean, that's nothing there. Got to be done. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you, sir. Are there any other persons present who wish to speak in favor? No one else is indicating so. Are there any persons present who wish to speak in opposition of this request? There is nobody here. Staff, any additional comments?
Not at this time.
Board, any other questions we want staff to answer? All right, the public meeting is now closed. Do I have a motion? And my feeling is to keep the two together unless we feel like we should break them apart. Let's have a motion, and if we want to break them apart, we can.
I'll move the case VAR 2018-006 at 3246 South Lincoln Street be granted variances to reduce the ground floor commercial space from required 50.1% to 0% to develop 2 attached homes, and to increase the maximum front setback from 5 feet to 15 feet.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, so I left the two motions together. Is that okay with the boards? All right, discussion, feelings. What do you think?
Discussion's much different than my feelings. I know exactly how I feel. I mean, this is what needs to happen to the site. The problem is that we're basically doing planning commission's work here.
We're doing council's work.
I mean, yeah.
But if council and planning did their work, there would never be a need for variances. I mean, this is the board of common sense, in essence, I would argue, that this is where people come to seek relief from certain variances that don't necessarily apply or make sense.
You know you're being recorded, right?
I do. I mean, my feeling is that we've granted these variances before in areas that don't have commercial. If we stick with currently, which by all indications, seems like it'll change, but we'll have one commercial lot on this block, right next to, across the alley, a historic overlay. That, to me, doesn't make sense. This, to me,
This whole zoning finger thing doesn't make any sense.
I agree, but that would be us doing the zoning support.
I'm struggling. Seeing these two variances together this time, I can get through the first criteria of, I mean, this property is being deprived of privileges enjoyed by other properties in the vicinity, but what I'm really struggling with still is the second criterion. The intent of the zone district is to be I think it says primarily commercial in nature, and I just can't get past that's what it says in the zoning, and I don't feel comfortable changing that.
I look at it as we were created as a board to help with issues like this. And when you're looking at a pretty much residential block, except for 2 medical offices that pretty sure, were probably built a little bit after those homes, in another 30-year cycle, most of those homes are going to be replaced, and they're not going to be replaced by businesses. They're going to be replaced by additional homes. So, and again, with the overlay on Sherman, you can't touch it. I mean, I don't.
Yeah, you couldn't extend over.
No. So just to have one half of a block just start cherry picking every single project, I mean, some of these houses, like I said, I don't know. It's better than what's there.
And we always have these conversations like when the next person up the block wants to come do it, we're going to do it again. I mean, we're setting precedent for the block, so.
Right, which again, I would have no problem with in some of this for the simple sake that it's a finger. It widens in this area. And I think that going to the second criteria, we don't need to adhere word for word. We're trying to adhere to the intent. And when they create these zonings, they don't look at every single lot. To me, their intent, obviously I think the zoning board wants to change this. We've had some movement on council of new members, so I can imagine they want to have it looked at again. But the zoning, I think it was 6-1 or 7-1? 7. So that indicates to me their intent is they clearly think that this should be changed. And again, we look at things case by case basis, but I wouldn't want to live next door to a place that is the only place on the block that has commercial. It could be a liquor store. It could be a number of things. And if you remember correctly, last time, there were also some gripes from some of the neighbors about already the commercial sites across the street and the noise from those. This would be bringing I think, just entirely too close to a residential neighborhood. But if your feeling is we should break the two variances up to vote, we can do that.
I just need some help coming to some, because I see the need. I'm just still struggling with how to get around this second criterion. So I don't, it's not so much splitting them up or keeping them together. It's just trying to find some logic that
I don't think we're creating public health, safety, welfare issues, so I don't have a problem with it from that side. It's more than
I think the
we're
current
having
property,
to change the zoning.
the current property is a public health and safety issue.
Correct.
Which, if you also saw the letter, is going to cost a pretty penny for them to take down. They could just leave it, and then we could have people camping in it.
Yeah, I mean, to me, again, this board is set up as a variance board. So it's the exception board to apply common sense. Otherwise, we would never be passing anything.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, that's the way I look at it, and to me, this makes common sense for the good of the neighborhood.
No, I can see these arguments about the public health, safety, and welfare. That's something I can latch on to.
Okay. No, sir, I'm sorry, the public meeting's closed. Are there any other discussions?
I voted for this the first time it came to us, and so I intend to vote for it again. I do think it meets the criterion, and I also will be supportive of the setback. I guess I would just ask staff to relay that I think you're hearing that we're imploring council to please take this up and address this issue, because we feel like we're sort of in a tough situation of.
I agree.
Yeah.
It's something we've done before.
So if you.
Yes, but no, I agree. It's something that should be addressed, and it seems like it was in their grasp.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's frustrating to hear that it just could have been handled. So.
Call for the vote.
Let's vote.
Mr. Rieger?
I voted yes. I believe the first criteria has been met since the MUB1 zone district extends north of East Floyd, and the other zoning districts are similar to the intent that he's asking for. I believe the second criteria has been met. The variance request is consistent with the intent of the MUB1, and I don't think it has any public health, safety, or welfare issues. I believe the third criteria has been met since the surrounding properties to the northwest and east are already developed, and there are 4 duplexes already on that lot, or on that block. I believe the fourth criteria has been met. The applicant is requesting the variance prior to any construction. I believe it hasn't been self-imposed.
Ms. Flynn?
I too voted yes for the same reasons.
Mr. Friesen?
I also voted yes for the reasons stated. I do believe that it is unique as far as what else is already on the site. So reacting to what's on the rest of the block is really covers that first criterion.
Mr. Taylor?
I voted yes. In addition to the reasons stated, the first criterion that by granting this variance, we're allowing the applicant to enjoy privileges enjoyed by other properties in this vicinity. Also that this does not, for the second criteria, this does not do anything to impair the public health, safety, or welfare.
Ms. Sheldorn?
I voted yes for the reasons stated previously.
Chair Finn?
I voted yes for the eloquent reasons stated as well.
Motion passes 6-0.
Thank you. We're going on to the next case, case VAR 2018-007. It's Chad and Kara Matthews, property 2921 South Washington Street. They're seeking a variance for a second-story addition to an existing one-unit building. Oh, okay. If you could hold on for a second, we're having a change. Thank you, sir. And Shelley, you'll reflect that we're changing. Mr. Friesen's leaving.
Schmitz is leaving too.
Oh,
Unless you want her back.
yep. We need her back.
You need her back.
Yeah, Randy, do you want to go?
Go grab her.
If she'll do it.
Yes. You're on.
I was trying to call in the lefty, and then you just laughed. Mr. Friesen has other obligations. Nothing. So we'll, once again, the public hearing for case number VAR 2018-006. Yes, sir.
Can you put on the record that Ms. Schmitz is present? Yes. Thank you.
And Mr. Friesen has left the building. No, please, that's why you get paid the big bucks. This is, again, this is case number 2018-007. Chad and Kara, Adam and Kara Matthews, 2921 South Washington Street. The applicants are requesting variance for a second-story addition to an existing one-unit dwelling with the following setback encroachments: 16-foot setback from the front property line and 2-foot setback from the north property line. Staff.
Do you swear or affirm under the penalties of perjury that you will tell the truth
I do.
Please state your name.
Eric Sampson, and I'm a planner too with the City of Englewood. And so this request is on North Washington Street. This is the location of the property. All the neighboring properties in that area are R1C zoning district. It's all single-family residential uses. And this is what's existing on the site now. There was a one-story brick house that was built in 1951 prior to this section of the town actually being incorporated into Englewood, being annexed in. So basically constructed prior to any sort of zoning or planning regulations. And what the applicants are requesting is to basically construct a second story on top of the single story, and they want to keep it about the same square footage, about 1,000 feet. And here's a couple pictures of the house. So right here is the north property line. You can see the fence is the property line, so where the house was constructed, it was And then I just added this picture as well to show the neighbor to the north and show that if there was a second story, there wouldn't be any issues with to sunlight or anything like that. Views or what. So overall, based on the 4 criteria, staff found that overall it would be impractical to require the applicant to construct a second story that meets setbacks, because that would create an undue hardship in and of itself, and overall that the hardship is not self-imposed because it was constructed, again, in 1951 prior to being included into the City of Englewood. So overall, staff recommends approval. And if you have any questions for me, I'd be happy to answer.
Does the board have any questions for staff at this time? I think you're done for now. If the applicant could please come forward to testify in the case, please state your name and address to the secretary who will administer the oath.
Adam Chad Matthews, 292 South Washington Street.
Do you swear or affirm that you will tell the truth in this proceeding before the
And Mr. Matthews, if you could just briefly kind of go over why you would like this variance.
Just kind of the reasons Eric mentioned before. The house was built in 1951, and we just feel, the fact that we're just going to extend on the existing footprint. We're not going to cantilever out, follow all the existing code requirements implemented other than the setback encroachment, and basically just kind of common sense stuff that we feel that we
Does the board have any questions for the applicant?
How high is the new structure going to be?
We would just follow I believe we can go 19 feet vertical before we go to the 12 inch on the roof,
And rather than on the one drawing, the garage is not shown, but you do have a garage in the back.
Yeah, there's a detached 450 square foot garage that is kind of similarly situated in the back of the lot.
And the entrance is from the front, so in essence, you can't build on one side, and if you built in back, you'd be using up, it looks like, almost all of the backyard and covering a majority of the lot. Does the board have any other questions for the applicant? Thank you, Mr. Matthews. Are there any persons present who wish to speak in favor of this request? There is no one present. Are there any persons present who wish to speak in opposition on this request? There's no indication. Staff, any additional comments?
No, not at this time.
Board, any other questions for staff at this time?
What is the lot coverage requirement there in this district?
Max is 40%.
Okay.
Anything else? Are we good? Okay. The public hearing is now closed. Can I get a motion, please?
I move that case VAR2018-007 at 2921 South Washington Street be granted a variance for a second-story addition to an existing one-unit dwelling to encroach 9 feet into the required 25-foot front setback and 3 feet into the required 5 feet side setback.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Discussion.
We did something similar on Downing Street where the footprint of the main floor of the house was way within the required setback and decided requiring a second floor to adhere to a setback the first floor didn't have. Something you didn't need to do.
I mean, to me, again, this is a little bit common sense. When you do an addition in a neighborhood, you don't necessarily want it to look like it's an addition. And I think when you start making things go over, it can look like an addition. And I think staying with the current lines of the building makes some sense.
And just from what little we can see in the vicinity map, I mean, I don't see anyone who's in that 25-foot front setback or even close.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of.
Are there any other thoughts, feelings, questions before we vote, other than someone's missing a microphone? You don't have a microphone?
I don't have a microphone.
All right. If there's nothing else, should we just vote? Let's vote.
Mr. Rieger?
I believe that the first criteria is unique due to the physical conditions that exist since the location of the existing principal structure.
You want to state how you voted first?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I do believe the first criteria is met since the location of the existing structure is already within the setbacks. I believe the second criteria has been met the add-on is similar to the surrounding structures, and I don't believe that it creates a public health, safety, or welfare issue. I believe the third criteria has been met because the proposed second-story addition is not encroaching further beyond the current setbacks. And the fourth criteria, I believe, has been met since the principal structure currently exists within the 16 foot of the property line and 2 foot from the north side of the property line.
Ms. Schmitz?
I voted yes. I think it is unique because the bottom floor of the existing house was in compliance, or there was no zoning when it was created in the first place. And to require the second story to comply with existing zoning would create a mismatch, which doesn't allow the applicant the privileges enjoyed by other properties in the vicinity. And I agree with the other reasons stated for the other criteria.
Ms. Flynn?
I voted yes for the reasons previously stated.
Mr. Taylor?
I voted yes for the reasons stated.
Ms. Sheldorn?
Voted yes for the reasons stated.
Chair Finn?
I voted yes for the reasons stated.
Motion passes 6-0.
Perfect. Thank you. So that closes that case. The public hearing for case number VAR 2018-008 Gage Enterprises, 3700 South Inca. They're requesting a variance for a 180-day extension to obtain a building permit. I have verification of the posting and of the subject property. If staff could give us an overview. Wow, we're getting all the staff tonight.
Do you swear or affirm an entitlement for trade that you will tell the truth in the adjustments
I do. Will Charles, I'm a planner with the Community Development Department. So this is, as you said, a request for an extension of 180 days. This variance came before you on January 10th. What they are requesting is, on their original variance, was to exceed the max lot coverage requirement. Originally, when the building had built, they had intended for a phase 2 for the property. And the original zoning at the time, what they had wanted to do was conforming with the code. As time went on, a couple of things changed with the office requirements in that zone district, making what they had intended to do originally not possible. So they were applying for a variance to exceed that max lot coverage to build a second building on the structure. The main reasons they're requesting this variance is...
But that variance has been granted.
It had been granted, yes. Right. Yeah. The main reason for the extension is just to do with the amount of design time required for commercial developments, as well as the time to get boots on the ground for construction. Staff is recommending you grant the extension of 180 days, and I can answer any questions if you have them.
Does the board have any questions for staff?
Yes. Do you happen to know what stage they're currently in? SD, DD, CDs?
They haven't applied for a building permit yet. As far as where they are prior to that, the applicant is here, so he can probably let you in.
Any other questions for staff? Thank you, sir. If the applicant may come forward to testify in the case, please state your name and address to the secretary who will administer the oath.
Gary Thompson. My home is 1357 West Davies Place, Littleton, Colorado.
Do you swear or affirm an entitlement to perjury that you will tell the truth in the proceeding before the Board of Adjustment?
Do.
Welcome back, Mr. Thompson. We're getting to be friends.
Thank you. Hearing this again. I'll just give briefly where we're at with this. So So this was approved on January 10th for the variance. Frankly, it took about a month after that for the engineering company to firmly decide, yes, we're going to do this and build it. Then we engaged an architect to begin the drawings, the planning and drawings in March. Or I guess late February. We have gotten our site improvement survey completed, our geotechnical drilling and geotechnical report completed. We've met with traffic and utilities. We have the electrical design underway, the mechanical design, like air conditioning and duct work, underway, and the civil design for the drainage and grading plan underway, and obviously the architectural drawings. I would say altogether we're about 80% complete on the drawings. We expect to have from our architect the draft final drawings on August 1, and then our target is to have the drawings completed on August 10, then to be submitted to City for building review there shortly, or as soon as we can thereafter. I mean, within a day or two, I suppose. And see, we've selected a general contractor for the project. We're not under contract with him yet. I mean, we need to get past this meeting tonight. We're working with the bank on financing. Our contractor believes that they can begin the construction in, as soon as we get the design review from the city, we would start basically immediately or as soon as they can, which we think would be during mid-September, so 2 months from now. Obviously, we have made substantial expenditures in all of this to get to the point we're at. In this extension, I had just asked for a 180-day extension. Really, I would be just as happy with a 120-day extension if that is something that matters to the board. I have no idea.
I don't know if it matters that much.
Fine.
So we can discuss that during but otherwise I think 180 is fine.
Okay. Well, that's what I have.
Perfect. Any questions from the board for the applicant?
I just have a general question. It seems like you've been proceeding diligently through this process. It seems to me like 180 days is pretty tight for a commercial project. Is that your experience in other municipalities, or do you think that that's a...
Yeah, I don't know. Even if we had started on like the next day, how to get under construction within
180 days. Yeah, in this market especially.
Right.
Right, okay. So perhaps something for staff to look at as well, that I don't know how many of these we've gotten.
This is my first one.
Okay.
We have another case that pops back up, but
they let the 180 days lapse and start all over again.
Several times.
Yeah, no, that's one. But okay, interesting. Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant from the board? Thank you, sir. I'm assuming you're going to still have some picnics out there this summer before you get everything started?
We are.
Okay.
Yes, we are. And we've designed in picnic area as well. So.
Nice. Fantastic. Perfect. Thank you, sir. Are there any persons present who wish to speak in favor of this request? There's no indication. Are there any persons present who wish to speak in opposition of this request? There's no indication. Staff, any additional comments? Board, any other questions for staff? The public meeting's now closed. Can I get a motion?
I move that case VAR 2017-020 be granted a variance to exceed the maximum lot coverage and extension.
No. An extension.
So we want to grant a variance to extend the case VAR 2017-020 an additional 180 days.
Correct.
Or just grant an extension. We're not granting a variance.
Just to grant an extension. Is that, can we have that friendly amendment? Can we have that friendly amendment? Perfect. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, discussion.
I appreciate it when applicants calendar things and come in a timely way to ask for extensions, and it seems like a very reasonable extension for this project.
Yeah, and I'm appreciative of all the explanation of how far you've gotten to.
Yeah, and it's, again, I think it's a lot to get done for this kind of project in that short time.
I work in the industry.
I'm not sure that's one of the criteria, however. Do we have criteria for something like this?
I think it's not like the standard criteria you would have on a regular variance like we did in the last two. I think this is extend 180-day period, and I think the motion speaks for itself. We just vote on it.
All right.
Without having, I mean, you can explain your vote, after that, and I think that's important. But there's not like 4 criteria you have to follow.
Perfect. Thank you, sir. Any other discussion by the board? Let's vote.
Mr. Rieger?
I voted yes to extend 180 days based on the fact that progress has been made on design.
Ms. Schmitz?
I voted yes for the same reasons.
Ms. Flynn?
I voted yes.
Mr. Taylor?
I voted yes.
Ms. Sheldorn?
I voted yes.
Chair Finn?
I also voted yes.
Motion passes 6-0.
Perfect. That case is closed. Thank you. I need approval of minutes for April 11th, 2018, the draft minutes. The chairman was a slacker and was not here, so he'll be abstaining. Do I have a motion and a second?
I'll move to approve the minutes from April 11, 2018.
A second?
Second.
All in favor, voice vote?
Aye.
Any opposed? No one's opposed. Finn is abstaining. I need a motion and a second to approve the case VAR 2018-001 3594 South Logan finding of fact.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
We'll do a voice vote. Once again, Finn abstaining. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that passes. I need a motion and a second for case VAR 2018-004 3275 South Downing Street, the finding of fact. A motion?
So moved.
Second.
Perfect. Finn abstaining. Voice vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. I need a motion and a second for finding of fact for case VAR 2018-005 900 East Hampton Avenue.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Finn is abstaining. A voice vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Perfect. Thank you. Staff, it's your choice.
I just wanted to introduce the gentleman behind me, and this is Wade Burkholder. He is our new planning manager, and he's the rest of our boss. So,
all right.
Wade has been with us, I think, a couple of months now, and so you may be seeing him from time to time.
Perfect. Nice to meet you, Wade. I think our staff here is excellent. They do a great job for us.
I do not believe we have any cases for next month.
All right.
Take August off.
Perfect. Mr. Attorney.
I have nothing to present to the board today.
All right. Board, anyone here have anything? All right. All right. I just want to thank you guys. I know this is a volunteer board, and you guys put in a lot of work. I think we're probably the best board out there. So, and I know I'm being recorded. Secretary, do you have anything for us? All right. We stand adjourned.